once you throw your box in your car now becomes a subwoofer box, your entire vehicle. This is the reason why if you were to take the same system in your car and put it in your house, it wouldn't be nearly as loud. And once you put it in your car, they call it cabin gain, but in essence, you're turning your car into a subwoofer box. And so I'd like to talk a little bit about that today. And really, to start with, I'd like to talk about how a 6th order series tuned, let me change the color on that, try redrawing over that one. Okay. Talk a little bit about how a 6th order series tuned bandpass works. And here's your, let's say, front chamber port. Here's your wall of subs right here. And then here is your, here is the port between chambers. So this is a bandpass. This is the rear chamber, which ports into the front chamber, which ports out the front. And so this is actually where all of the volume's coming from, all the frequencies and the hertz. It's coming all out of this into the car. And this is the port between the front chamber and rear chamber. Now there's also parallel ported, but for this I would like to talk about a series ported. So what happens is your speakers play. This back chamber is tuned typically low, so maybe at, we'll say, 30 hertz. And the front chamber is typically tuned twice as high, at 60 hertz. And what you end up with is a graph kind of like this, and it goes up, and it might dip just a little bit, and it comes back down. And there's your frequency range. So you have 30 hertz down here, and you got 60 hertz up here. And if it's designed really well, you basically don't have this dip. It just kind of cuts over like that, and then it tails off at the end. But you end up being able to play like, man, you have a wide bandwidth. You can play like 20 to like 75 hertz with something like this. So, and I'll get into 6 orders a little bit more later on. But if you think about that, now you think about in your car. Oops. And okay. Now, if you think about in your car, and you have a, we'll just put a sub box back here, and we'll go like that. So that's the sub box in the car, and then we'll draw. So we'll just say that the subs are up here. Right, they're facing up. This is supposed to be a side view, but just bear with me. I didn't have time to draw all this out really well because I'm going to be erasing it and redrawing over it. And then they always say for this type of setup, like an SUV, you port back. So here's your port right here. It's a slot port to the back of the vehicle, subs up. Now think about this. Think about this as being your back chamber, and now you port into this chamber, and this chamber is actually your front chamber. So your vehicle with a ported box becomes a 6th order. Especially once you roll this window down, it's a 6th order series tuned bandpass box, or you open the door or whatever. So that's essentially what it becomes. When you roll the window down, typically your highs get a little louder, your higher frequency range. And once again, I'll talk a little bit about a 4th order real quick. Okay. So 4th order box, bandpass box. You've got a rear chamber. I'll draw it like that. And we'll put that chamber on. And then we'll put the sub here. A wall of subs. and then you've got one port out here. So this back part is sealed, and then this front part is ported. Right? That's your fourth order bandpass box. Well, what happens in the vehicle if you have a sealed box is essentially the same thing. So you end up with a fourth order bandpass box right here. So this chamber is sealed, and this one, once you roll down the window, you port it, and now you've got a fourth chamber or a fourth order reflex, single reflex bandpass box. What actually happens for people that have the people that actually have a 6 order, in fact, let me just go ahead and I'll just draw this on the image in the car. So let's say they actually have a Series 2 and 6 order, which is typically like this entire back part of the vehicle becomes the box. Let me try to maybe go with blue and just change the color in here. Okay. This back part comes the entire box, and then they do their wall of subs. I'm going to draw this one a little differently. I'm going to do it like this. And here's your subs. Okay, so now you have a bottom chamber here. We'll go ahead and draw a port up here. Okay, so now you have the bottom chamber, and it ports into this top chamber, which ports into the vehicle. So now this actually becomes an 8th order bandpass, because you got one chamber here, and then this becomes a chamber. And I've known people that have swapped. They've taken the exact same box dimensions and setup and took it from one vehicle and put it in another vehicle, and now they've got all sorts of problems. It doesn't play as loud, it doesn't have as much bandwidth, it's not as windy, it unloads, and it's because this whole front chamber now is part of their box. So when they change vehicles, this changes everything. And I would also, on 6 orders, I recommend the slant. A lot of times people will do a straight baffle or a straight up and down vertical baffle. The slant actually helps with your bandwidth. I'll get into that when we talk about 6 order boxes sometime in the future. Okay, so now that you understand that, really a lot of guys at competition know and understand when they wall their vehicle maybe here. In fact, we'll talk real quick about that. Let's go ahead and let's say they wall their vehicle, B-pillar walled vehicle. So here's their wall, and they got the subs right here on the front. And here's their subs on the front. And then they've got a port. I know it's probably not the best spot to put a port. But this, and then once they seal off this right here, so there's absolutely no error going from the front to the back. And this now becomes, you think it's a standard ported box, but once again, it's a 6 order box, especially if they tune low. They can tune this part low, and then this part can be high. This works really well if this front cabin is kind of smaller. These boxes typically tend to work well. And typically what happens is people competition know this, and they understand how to make this work so that they essentially get another chamber. You add another chamber, you get more efficiency. So you go from a 6th order to an 8th order, you're more efficient, assuming that it's a good box design, 8th order to 10th and so on. Now, it does mess with your acoustics, but if you're sitting in the box, like you're going to have group delay, but if you're sitting in the box, it's not going to be nearly as noticeable. Okay, now I'd like to also talk a little bit about the standard box you see a lot. Let's draw this right here. We always talk about, for like SUVs, they always talk about subs up. So subs are facing up for like a no-wall type situation. So you got this baby sitting in the back hatch part, or maybe just you have your seats folded down and you've got this behind the B-pillar. Now I'd like to also draw your port right here. Okay, so pretend this is your port. It's a slot port. And what happens is they always talk about this being the loudest. And a couple things are going on here. One, you've got loading between the subs up here and down here. So these subs, as they flux back and forth, they push off the roof and they push off the bottom of the box. And it helps give them loading, which means they're going to sound better, they're going to take more power, and so on. So this helps them with loading, especially if you've got something that's maybe halfway. So notice how this is about maybe, let's say, 2 feet up to this and then 2 feet up to this. It's going to help peak right around your tuning frequency. But what also is happening is back here, the bass is resonating in your port right here. It's resonating. And then essentially what's going to happen is the bass is going to travel from here up through here and then come in to the rest of the vehicle. And what happens right here is as they push this back, this is really crucial. How much space you have between the box and the back of the vehicle. If you too tight, it's going to kill your bass. You can also have it maybe be up to, like, let's say this is 4 inches. You could have this be forward to like 6 inches, and it'll actually extend this port. So now this port is going to use part of this as part of your bass. And it's going to lower the frequency, which is part of the reason people like it. But it also helps to kind of helps the port air to mingle with the rest of the cabin, right? To come out and to expand in a way where, like, you're getting a little bit of loading almost back here with the port, and it's not just throwing right out into the open. So you got a little bit of port loading, and it's also helping to acclimate the bass coming out of the port to the rest of the vehicle, which actually helps a little bit with bandwidth. I'll show you real quick my car. It's right behind the back seat, kind of follows the contour of the back seat. My box comes up like this, squares over, and then it goes down like this. It's almost like a pyramid without the capstone on the top. And my subs are facing forward right here. And then I have a port right here. Goes pretty much all the way down like that. And so here's my bass right here. This is where it's loading. And when mine comes out, I've got kind of a little bit of an exaggerated, my car's very curvy. So my car is kind of almost more like this. And what happens is the bass comes out right here, and it actually uses this as horn loading. So this part right here horn loads my box, and it gives it better bandwidth. That's part of the reason I talked about my box having really, really good bandwidth. As this is just one of the reasons for that. Okay, this is also part of the reason why someone can take a system in one vehicle and throw it in another vehicle and it just doesn't sound good, or it performs awesome, whatever. You can have those type of situations because essentially you're changing the rest of the box. And that's what people always talk about. So my box mathematically is actually tuned to 39 hertz. But when I've tested my system, and I did basically I checked for rise and impedance. It's actually at 35. I knew it would be lower than 39. I was expecting around 35 after all said and done, after everything I did with it. I was expecting 35, maybe 36. Turned out to be 35, which is perfect. And that's part of because of this horn loading, and it's partly because of the way I designed the slot port on it. But I've had boxes change as much as 5 hertz once I threw them in the vehicle, because the vehicle has that much of an impact on your whole system. So you almost need to design your box in a way that can take advantage of your vehicle. That's just something to think about. It's what a lot of people in competition do, and that's why they always talk about moving your box around constantly in the car. Right? Aim it backwards, aim it up, aim it frontwards, aim it sideways, maybe even. Try port up, port back, all of those things, because those all can make little differences that can add 2, 3 dB, or it can actually cut back on dB and add bandwidth. I've seen that as well. BearVids actually did some videos where he was testing some different subwoofer designs, and he'd found kind of that by angling at different directions, you kind of either gain some within a narrow range, or you actually gain some over a wide range, but not as much in that narrow range. It's kind of interesting. Anyways, I hope this kind of gives you something to think about. There's a lot of really kind of cool stuff about vehicles and kind of helping them to become part of your enclosure. In fact, that's something that you can do. That's why people will add like Deadener or Vibraflex or something like that, because they're stiffening up the front part of the car, so it acts a little bit more like a box. But there's a lot of little things that you can do. We can talk some about that, maybe vehicle modifications in the future that you can play with to add some either typically sound quality or SPL. Anyways, for now, I hope you enjoy your weekend, and cheers.